Welcome fellow server enthusiasts. In this video we're kicking off our Ubuntu server course with a crucial step, getting your hands on the Ubuntu server and preparing it for installation. We'll cover where to download Ubuntu server and how to create a USB bootable drive. Now make sure you have a second computer that is just for your server. So get a second machine that you can use to install your Ubuntu server software on. So first things first, the first thing you need to do is to download the Ubuntu server image. You can grab this from the official Ubuntu website. Head over to ubuntu.com/download/server or just go to ubuntu.com, click download and then click server. That will take you automatically to the right side. So make sure that to select a version that matches your needs. You can download the latest version here, but notice that if you not have a standard Intel computer, you can select here alternative architectures if you have some weird system. So for most people, you can just download the Ubuntu server image. Now this will need some space. Depending on your internet speed, it can be very fast or slower. It probably will be 2 gigabytes or more. You'll see if you have a slow connection, this is just gonna take a while. Now, before you download, make sure you select the right chipset for your server. So I'm gonna click back here to show you what I mean. You can select here alternative architectures. Now, if you have a standard computer, so a standard PC, then what you will need is a 64-bit image. If you have older computer, you need a 32-bit version, and probably you just have an Intel computer. But if you have something else, then you'll see there are several other options. So if you have a weird or a different processor, then you might need one of these other versions. If you just have a standard Intel computer that can run Windows, Linux, then the default one will be fine. So we are downloading this file. Now what do we do with this file? We have the Ubuntu server software, or at least it's almost completed downloading, but then it's on our computer. How do we get it to install on our server? To do that, we need an USB stick as well. So we put this image, we will put it on a USB stick. There are different tools for that depending on what you're using. So if you're a Windows user, you can use Rufus for that. So if you go to the website rufus.ie, you can use this tool to put that image that you just downloaded onto a USB stick. Now, if you're a Mac or a Linux user, you can use a tool called Balena Etcher. It's a similar kind of tool. You download the program and it shows immediately how to use it. Select the image, select drive and click flash. So it really depends on what you're using, but that's the main idea. So you see we downloaded this file, and because I'm on a Windows computer, I will download the Rufus program. So depending on if you want to permanently install it or not and which kind of Windows you have, can get that program. So it's done. I'm gonna open it. So now what we'll need to do once this software starts, do we want updates? No. What we will do once it starts is select our image. So select the device, plug in your USB flash drive. Make sure it's empty so that you don't have any files on there that you might need that you could lose. And make sure it's large enough. You'll see that the Ubuntu file was 2 gigabytes, so make sure it's at least 2 gigabytes. Then select your file here. You see, you can click select. That will give this pop-up. So we go to downloads, select our file. And then if you plugged in your USB, this button will be clickable. So we'll click it and the USB drive will then be ready. Now, if you're not on Windows or if you don't want to use Rufus, you can use this tool from balena.io, select the image, select the drive and click flash. So it has less steps, but the same idea. So if we download that, you'll see we can use it on Windows as well. So we're gonna download it. Now, this program's a little bit larger, but it's the same principle. We flash the file to the USB disk. So the main idea is to put that Ubuntu server image onto a USB flash disk. And there are different ways to achieve that. You can do that with Rufus, you can do that with Balena Etches. and perhaps some other programs. So we open this program, and then once it's opened, you can select the file, the drive, and click flash. So you'll be able to select the image, then to select the drive and click flash, and it will prepare your USB for you. Now, once that's finished, with your bootable USB drive ready, you want to insert that drive into your server and just start from that USB stick. Now, it might do that by default, or you might need to access the BIOS or UEFI settings to change your boot order to start from that USB disk. Now, there you have it then. So what do you do there? Then it starts the installation software. So you see a command line interface where you can then install the Ubuntu server. So in the next video, we'll walk you through the installation process. So be sure to stay tuned. That's it for the intro. So now grab the USB server ISO, try to create that bootable USB drive and insert it into your network server. If you have any questions that you would like to explore, you can always reach out to me. I'm Frank, and I'll catch you in the next video. Happy server building. Hi there, tech enthusiasts. Welcome back to our Ubuntu installation adventure. So if you missed the previous parts, just hit the rewind button. We're inside the installation process now. So this is what you should see once you start the installation. So now it's time to pick up where we left off. First, you can select a language. So if you want anything other than English, you can select that. However, I suggest that you pick English because whenever you're doing troubleshooting, when you find some problem, usually you have documentation on the internet in English. Whereas in other languages, there is just less documentation. So if you're a good level English speaker, it is a good idea to choose English. But if you're otherwise, you can pick another language if you're more comfortable with that. But you might have less documentation or help online on that. So what you can do is install an update. Now this is completely optional. You can update after installing. So we're gonna go with that, continue without updating, and then update later on. Now, what we have to do is select our keyboard layout. I have a US English keyboard. This really depends on what kind of keyboard you have. So you can press enter and then select the keyboard you have, depending on the country you're in or the type of keyboard you have. Now these keyboards have variants as well. So it really depends on what you have. I have a US International keyboard, but if you are a non-English person, you might have extra keys, you might have a completely different layout. So it really depends on your keyboard. There's an option to identify keyboards. Then it will do the process for you and you don't have to manually search for it if you're not quite sure. So I'm gonna click done because, well, we already select the keyboards. And otherwise select your country and region and pick the keyboard that works for you. If you don't select the right one, you can change it later on, but then some keys might be off place. So click done, and then it asks us what we want to install. So we can install either Ubuntu server full package. It says like everything. You can do a minimal install, so it doesn't come with all the software and it's faster, but then doesn't include everything. And if necessary, you can add drivers. Now that might be necessary. For example, some drivers might not work. So for example, your Wi-Fi card or something else important might not work without these third-party drivers. So if you have some devices that has third-party drivers, it's a good option to enable it so that you won't start a server and then don't have any internet, for example, don't have any Wi-Fi or maybe something else you need. So in general, it's a good idea. I'm going to select it and press tab and done, press enter. Okay, now we're going to configure the network. If you're connected via the Ethernet, so if you have a cable inside your box, then it will work right away. So it should look like this and basically done. If you're using Wi-Fi, don't worry, you can set it up later. So for now in the installation, I recommend that you have a cable plugged in because everything will be a bit more smoother to do that. So you'll see here I already have an address. If you don't have that, you can set that. If you press enter, you can see also the interfaces. You can change, if you don't have automatic IP addresses, you can change it here to manual and type your own settings. If you select manual, you can select your own subnet, address, gateway, all your network configuration. However, in my case, I have the automatic system, DHCP. So everything will be done automatically. We're gonna go click done. Done. And you'll see it's testing to download the Ubuntu files. So, and this is also an automatic check if your network is correctly configured. If you see this output, the mirror patient or the test passed that you can see up there, and seeing this output, it means that your network connection is working, and we can now continue the installation. So click done. I recommend that you have a separate computer for this and don't do any partitioning, because if partitioning goes wrong, it can, if there's already a Windows on there, Linux or some other system, you can lose your files, or maybe the computer doesn't start anymore. It can be a mess. So if you have a dedicated computer, that's the most easiest, and given the prices of computers these days, I just recommend going with a separate computer that doesn't have anything installed, or just something you want to erase, so that you can go with use entire disk. If you want, you can give extra security to your disk by doing encryption. That means the disk itself is scrambled, so nobody who, for example, steals your computer can then access your data. They would need a passphrase to access it. You'll see if you click select it, it lets you select a passphrase. But keep in mind there is no forget option. So if you would forget the passphrase, you can then no longer access your disk yourself. So if you go that route, it will be more secure in case of theft of the hardware, in case of theft of the device. Nobody would be able to read any data on your disk, on your computer, unless they have the passphrase, including yourself. So that's a very good option if you want more security, but then make sure you never forget that password. So for this example, I'm just gonna go with disabled. Click done, and then click done again. Click continue. Enter. Now it will ask you some information. So then type your information, which will be different, of course, for you. You can pick anything you want. Your personal name, account name, server name, and some passwords. So fill in whatever you want. It's just your personal device information, your name, your username, and your passwords. You can update or upgrade this to Ubuntu Pro. You'll have more security updates, which is useful, but for now I'm gonna skip that. Now you get this question: do you want to install OpenSSH server? So this allows you to remotely log in into your file sharing server from whatever computer in the network. So that can be your Linux computer, it can be a Windows computer, it can be a Mac computer, and so on, and remotely control the computer. So this is very useful, especially if you have a server without a screen, or have your computer doesn't have a screen, your computer, then you can remotely log in. And even if that's not the case, it's just very simple to log into your server from your home computer and then do some quick changes if you need to. So it's a very useful feature. However, keep in mind that there is a security aspect too. So of course, if you open the server, it also is a potential for hackers or attackers to attack if they're on the same network. So for now, we're gonna just click done. Click done again. Now there's some more questions here. So some common server packages that you can install. So you see all kind of apps here, like open source Kanban, WECon. There's Docker for running containers, all kind of apps that you can install onto your server if you want to. So I'm just gonna leave the default, but you can install different things. For example, Nextcloud to run your own cloud, your own file sharing cloud. Now, just to keep things simple, I'm gonna click done and then show you whatever you want to install or how to install software later on. So now it is installing, and you just have to wait for this installation to complete. So you can grab a coffee or do something else. So once it's done, you'll see this screen where you have the option to reboot. So you'll see there's no longer any screen output, and you have the option to reboot now. So if you press enter, it will restart your computer and hopefully start in the Ubuntu server operating system. Hey there, awesome folks. Welcome back to the Ubuntu Network Server course. In this video, we're gonna pick up where we left off. You've just booted your freshly installed Ubuntu Network Server, and we're about to dive into some action. Now, if you're new to the command line and you were expecting some graphical interface, don't sweat it. We're in this together, and I'll make this as painless as possible. The command line is our playground, our gateway to the server's soul. So, let's open the terminal and get things rolling. First, you'll have to log in using your username and password that you set during the installation. Once you log in, you'll see this pop-up saying a message about your Ubuntu server and some general information about your system. First things first, let's gather some essential server information. Type in the command hostname. You type hostname and you press enter. And you'll see the hostname on your computer. That is your server's name, like the secret handshake to your server's club. Next, we can check the IP address. This is the network address of our server. So enter this little gem, IP space A, enter. This command will list all the network interfaces. So in this case, we have two interfaces, the loopback device, LO, and the network device, NMP1S0. That is the actual network device. You'll always see a loopback device, but that's not a physical device. So we're interested here in number 2. And the IP address or the network address is a number that consists of 4 numbers. So you'll see the address here 192.168.122 and then 223 with internet or inet in front. That is your device, your network device address. Now, let's go into the next thing. Now, to do anything significant on our server, we often need to be the boss of the server. So you'll see I logged in as Frank. That is not the boss of the server. The boss on any Linux server is called root, R-O-O-T. And to become or to do anything as root, you type sudo in front of it. So whenever you see me type sudo before a command, it means I'm asking for superhero powers temporarily. For example, we can type sudo space apt space update. So the command here is apt update, but we're gonna execute it as the boss of this system, as the superhero or the administrator. So we type sudo in front, and as you might expect, apt update updates the package list. So it will make our server software current and secure. So if you press enter, ask us for the password, and you'll see it's doing an update now. And so whenever you want to execute something as administrator, type sudo in front. Now, okay, we have a computer, and if you never used Linux before, there's something you might be already familiar with, which are files and a file system. So you know what they say, know your terrain. So let's take a peek into the file server system. We can use the ls command, which is short for list. So we can type ls, and that lists the files in the current directory. So in the current directory, there is no any file. We can see the current directory with the command pwd, enter. So we're in the directory /home/frank, which can be different on your computer, whatever username you picked. And there's not any file in there. Now, this is not the top file. So on any Linux system, the top of the system is the slash, and then all the folders go deeper. So let's list the slash folder, ls/. And you'll see we have several directories in there. We have the home directory. We have the etc directory, which is for config files. We have media and mnt directories, which are for media. Then we have the var directory, the user directory, and also the root directory. So you'll see the boss of the system, root, has its own directory on the system. That is true for any Linux system. Now, as I mentioned, the etc directory, That's where all the config files are stored. So that will be very important for our server. Now let's dive into this directory using the cd or the change directory command. So cd, short for change directory. And then we type cd/etc and press enter. Now we just stepped into the etc directory. We don't see anything except that we see /etc on the screen. That means we're in the etc directory. To see the current directory, we can use the pwd command again. It will show us, okay, we are inside the etc directory. And this is where all kind of server configuration files live. So if we type the list command, ls, and press enter, you should see lots of configuration files. So we've got lots of configuration files right there, directly on our Linux system without doing anything basically. So there's a lot of things you can configure in a Linux system. So that shows you the ls command. To show the file contents, you can type command cat, so cat, and then with any file, for example crontab. You'll see the gray ones are files and the blue ones are directories. So cat contrab will show the file contents on the screen. It's not a text editor, it will just output that content on the screen. So when you type cat with any file name, you can see the file contents. Now of course the file must exist, so if we type cat with nonsense, it will tell us that the nonsense file does not exist. So you can only show file contents of files that are actually exist, so the gray ones. You can also create new files, but we cannot do that in the etc directory unless we're administrator. So let's go back to the home directory, so /home/your username. Now to create a new file, we can type touch. So touch with your file name. And that creates a new file. So if we list the files, you'll see a new file, and it is an empty file. If you want to go up a directory, so pwd shows you the current directory. Let's say you want to move up one. You can type cd ... enter, and now you're one directory higher. pwd would show you again the directory. Now we can go back, cd with your username, pwd, and you're back in your home directory. So now it's time to explore. It's just the tip of the iceberg. So you might want to look around and fiddle around with these commands and see what you can find on your Linux system. So stay tuned, stay curious, and let's embark this incredible journey to becoming a Ubuntu Network Server wizard. If you have any questions or topics you'd like to explore, just send me the questions and I'll do my best to help you out. So until next time, keep networking, keep learning, and keep rocking your Ubuntu server. I'm Frank, and I'll catch you in the next video. Hey there, fellow server enthusiasts. Welcome back to our Ubuntu Network Server course. In this video, we're diving into the exciting world of SSH, also called Secure Shell. So it's remote access through the command line. It's the key potential to unlocking the true power or potential of your server. So let's get started. Before we dive in, let's talk about SSH. SSH is a secure way to remotely access your server through the command line. So, of course, we are not gonna remote access inside our server itself. We will do it from another computer. This can be a Windows computer, a Mac computer, another Linux computer, or even your phone. So, with the command line, you can remotely access, and it's very handy for server administration. It's like having a magic portal to your server, wherever you are. First, let's see if SSH is installed on your server. Open a terminal and type SSH-V. So you'll see SSH is installed on the server. If it's not, we'll install it shortly. So if you don't see any reply, we're just gonna type this command. I type sudo in front because we're gonna install something which needs you to be root or administrator. So sudo takes care of that, and then the command is apt, the Ubuntu package manager, install, and the OpenSSH server is the program. So press enter, and then type your password. So you'll see in my computer it's already installed because I installed it during the installation. Now we have to make sure that this SSH service is up and running. For that, we can use this command. So you should see that it's active and it's running. Now, if it is not, you can restart it or stop it and start it by typing that after it. Okay, so you might want to enable SSH automatically every time your server boots up. You can do that with this command. So if you do that, then it will automatically start, just like in the screen here. When we start the computer, it's running the the secure shell server. Now, because it's already enabled, I'm not going to run that command. You can configure it. Now, guess where this configuration is stored? That's right, the etc directory. So we can go into the etc directory. And from here, we can open a file called sshd-config. So you can do that with whatever editor you want. I'm gonna pick Nano for this because it's really simple for this video. So we're gonna open this file, etc sshd-config. Inside this file, you can customize how SSH works on your computer. For example, you can change the default port it listens to. It's like the communication line. You can disable password authentication in favor of some more secure methods, or change other things, maybe maximum possible retries, or maximum people that can log into the server, and so on. So we don't really have to change anything now. But if you change the file, make sure to restart SSH. So you can do that with this command. So every time you change your config file, run that command to change it. Now the config file, remember, is inside etc ssh ssd_config. That's the config file. So far, we only looked at remote access stuff on the server itself, which might confuse you a bit because it's remote access, so we access it from another computer. Well, let's get to that now, because what we did so far is just configuring the servers on the server that lets us remotely connect to it. But we're not actually connecting yet, right? So let's do that. We open another computer, which could be a Windows computer or anything else. And from here, we can open a terminal. Now, this computer doesn't have to be Windows. It can be a Mac. It can be another Linux computer. It can be a BSD variant or whichever operating system. You can even do it from your phone. So we type SSH, then your username. Now, if you don't know your username on a Linux system, you can type the command whoami, enter. And then you want to type the @ symbol, similar to when you use email. Now, it seems my keyboard is configured as a different keyboard layout. Okay, here we go. We need the @ symbol and then the address, the network address of your computer. Remember, we could see that with the command IP space A. That shows you your network address. So we can type that 192. It will be different on your computer, so don't type the same IP address. Type the one that is showing in the IPA command. Okay, type yes when they ask. Type your password. And now you're inside the Ubuntu computer. See, we have here, welcome to Ubuntu. So we can now remotely control the Ubuntu server from our Windows box. Awesome. So if you enter your password correctly, you now can completely control your Ubuntu server from your Windows computer. And anything you do affects directly that box. So if I type whoami, you'll see Frank. And we can do anything. For example, if I were to type reboot or sudo reboot, it will restart the server. It won't restart Windows, it will restart the server. And that's just one of the commands you can do. You can do any Linux command, any server command. Now we are remotely controlling the computer, similar to remote desktop on Windows or other systems, but they usually have graphical interfaces. So now we are remotely controlling the computer, the server, using the terminal. So far we used a password to log in. Now, that's not necessarily the most secure, so for even better security, you can consider using SSH keys for authentication instead of passwords. but it's a topic that is outside of the scope of this video. SSH is a really powerful tool because it opens endless possibilities to managing computers remotely. So it's secure, it's versatile, and it's a must-know for any server admin. So thank you for joining in this video. Keep exploring, keep learning, keep securing your Ubuntu network server. If you have any questions that you'd like to drop, just ask them and I'll get back to you. Hello server enthusiasts, welcome back. We're getting back into the Ubuntu Network Server course. In this version, we'll dive into the nitty-gritty of user accounts and permission. It's all about controlling who does what on a server, so let's get started. User management is crucial for maintaining a secure and organized server. Each user on your system should have their own account and specific permissions. You don't want different users messing with your system at the same files. So let's get started by creating a new user. Open the terminal and type this command, sudo space add user, and then the username you want to add. So any name you can up with. Then it will prompt you for your password. Pick a good password and make sure that it's a really good password, because in the last video we opened up remote access. So we don't want strangers to log in. Make sure your password is good. Don't pick anything too simple. Now it will ask some more questions that are optional to enter. You don't have to enter all this information. It will ask you, is it correct? Press capital Y if it's correct. And now a new user has been added. So if you want to remotely log in, you can now log in with the new username. User has its own directory. So if we go to the home directory and list the folders, you'll see now there are two directories. Every user has its own directory for its files that he or she can interact with. Okay, let's get on to the next thing. If you want that your user can do sudo, because that is not the default. By default you can just log in as user, but you can't do anything as administrator. So if to grant your new user super user or sudo privileges, add them to the sudo group with this command. And now the new username. So now the new user will be able to use the sudo command. Now you don't want that for every user. For security reasons, some users shouldn't be able to do sudo because maybe they are just not be able to do any system configuring. So to switch accounts, if you're, for example, now we are logged in as Frank, and maybe we want to be the new user, we type sudo space and then the new username. And you'll see now I am not logged in as Frank anymore. We can double check with the command who am I. And you'll see we are no longer Frank. So that's one way you can switch users. But of course, if you use SSH remote access, you don't have to do that. You can just log into the user that you are. So let's talk about permissions and ownership. In Linux, everything is a file. Files have owners and permissions that dictate who can access and modify them. So to see the file permissions of a file or directory, type the command ls space -l. So this guy doesn't have any files. Let's go up a directory and then type ls space -l. And you'll see there's different owners. So we have the Frank directory, which is owned by Frank, and the Tux directory, which is owned by Tux. So every file, or even the folders here, with two different folders, are owned by different users. But there are also different permissions. So in the beginning of those two lines, you see some characters there, dr, w, xr, and so on. So these are permissions of folders and files. So let's go into the Tux directory again. Let's create a new file. So now we have a file called file. To change the permissions, let's make that file more clear. So we can remove a file with this command. And let's make some file name. So we have a file called file name. And now we don't see any permissions. So we type ls space -l. And now we see that there is some permissions there. And we can change those permissions. For example, to give the owner read and write permissions, you type the command chmod u plus rw file name. Now, look again, and you'll see it's the same, because the first 3 characters are for the user, the second for the group, and so those are the same. So there's a lot more to permissions we can change as well. So let's try with minus, and now look again, and okay, those permissions are now gone. The user can no longer read and write that file. So you can play around with permissions. It's a bit cryptic because you're using these characters u, r, w, and so on, but you can change settings for a file and folder. Who can read it? Can a user read it? Can a group read it? And so on. You can also change the ownership of a file or directory. So let's say we have this file. Let me clear the screen here. We have the file name. Let's say we want to change that to be owned by Frank instead of by Tux. You can type sudo. We have to be administrator, chown, and then the new owner name with the new group name and the file name. Now if you check, we need to type the password for the administrator. Check again, and you'll see the file is now owned by Frank inside of the Tux directory. So we have just changed the permissions. To change it again, we just change it back. So the username and the group, and now it's owned by the same user again. Now directory permissions are a bit different. If you want to grant read, write, and execute permissions, you can use the commands chmod 777 with the directory name. So let's first create a directory. We created a directory with mkdir, and these have permissions as well. So let's say we want to give all the permissions, then we can type this chmod 777 folder, list it again, and you'll see now it has all the permissions. But you want to be cautious with this, because altering permissions can give some security risks. So let's change those numbers. And you'll see the permissions have just changed again. So you can mess around with permissions for both files and folders. And it is a bit cryptic, cryptic to understand, so you have to check the manual on that, but it's something you can do for any file. So that is just a tip of the iceberg for user management and permissions. Mastering these skills is essential for maintaining a well-organized and secure server. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep your Ubuntu network service in top shape. If you have any questions, you can just ask me. Feel free to drop the questions. I'll catch you in the next video. Welcome back. Do you want to securely transfer files to and from your server? Then you might need SFTP, Secure File Transfer Protocol. This lets you easily move files back and forth to your network server. It's an essential tool for your file server. Let's get started. So what is this SFTP? SFTP is a secure and efficient way to transfer files back and forth to your server, but not just plain text, but it's encrypted, meaning the text through the Wi-Fi or through the cable is unreadable by any malicious actor. So let's get started. So probably by now you have already installed the OpenSSH server app, but just to be sure, let's confirm it. Oh, there we go. It's already installed. If you want to know about configuring this, go back to the previous video. Now we are just going to configure it for the SFTP service. So we're going to open that file again. And now we're going to scroll down and look for SFTP server. So let me just search through this file. So you should have this line enabled. If there is one of these hashtags in the front, it's disabled, so make sure it's enabled. So it should say subsystem, SFTP, and then rest. So save it, Ctrl O to save, Ctrl X to exit. Now, next thing we want to do is to tell where to set the user directories. So we might want to restrict the users to specific directories. By default, that's not the case. So if you want that, you can add that to the configuration file. So if we open it again, then you can add that at the bottom here. So might need some more lines here. Okay, so adding those lines would restrict the users to a certain directory, but is not really relevant for now for this demo. So if you want, you can add that to your config file. I'm just gonna comment it out for now. Let's keep it simple and just enable the SFTP server. Now, you might want to add a group for the SFTP users. And you want to add people to those SFTP users group. So you can do that like this. And now you will have to restart SSH. Okay, we can now test it with any SFTP client. That can be FileZilla, SCP, or any other. So use the server's IP address, your username, password, and you should be able to then transfer files. So let's open our Windows computer. So we could try it with the command line. Exit here. Maybe there's a command line SFTP client. There is. So one way to connect would be through the command line. So your username and then the @ symbol. And then the IP address of your network server, which you can see with the command IP space A. So in this case, 192.168. This address, but it will be different on your computer. So just type IP space A, and then you can log in through the command line. So to download files, you can type the command get. And to upload a file, you can type put with whatever file. Now, okay, this is a lot of command line. You don't necessarily have to use the command line. There's programs like FileZilla and WinSCP that you can use to easily manage it with a graphical interface where you can just drag and drop. So instead of typing everything in the command line, if you want to transfer files or download files, you can use WinSCP or FileZilla to easily do that. And there is not really any advantage to one or the other. They're just different graphical interfaces that do the same. So let's say we download this one. We can download the program, install it. Now this is going to take a moment. Okay, we can now start the setup. And this is just a simple graphical setup. So click accept, next, next, install, and that will install the graphical variant for this, or one of the graphical variants that you can use to easily transfer files to your server. So just takes a moment and we can now launch it. And then you'll have a graphical interface where you can connect to your server. Okay, here we go. You can type your IP address. It says here host name, but just type your network IP address. your username, password. If you changed your port, you should change that as well. And then just click login. Now that's gonna connect, click yes. And you see you're now inside your server on the right, and on the left you have your local computer. If you want to download it, you can just drag it or right click download, and it will download it to your directory on the left. If you want to upload something, you can right click here and click upload, or drag it to the directory. You see it asks, and now the file is uploaded. So this is one way to do it graphically. It's easier this way. You can drag and drop files around. Right click, you also have some other options like rename, delete. So it's an easier way to transfer files to your server than just a command line. And this program is WinSCP, but there's other program, FileZilla, which basically is the same, just a different graphical interface, but the same idea. So let me just show you a screenshot here. And it's the same idea, it's just a different program, but you can move files back and forth. And you see on top here, you can log in, click connect, and then you can upload and download files from your server. Now, one advantage of this may be that they have this little progress bar, so you can see if you download and upload large files, how much progress it is, instead of just a text interface for that. But overall, it's the same idea. It's just a graphical interface for transferring files back and forth to your server.